I was never supposed to be here. Earth's elite Space Force Academy was for the best of the best, the sons and daughters of government officials, corporate moguls, and military legends. It was the gateway to the stars, the place where humanity's future was trained and molded. I got in by sheer determination and intelligence. Unlike my classmates, I wasn't born into privilege. I didn't have a powerful last name, a trust fund, or family connections. What I had was a full-ride scholarship that I fought tooth and nail to earn, a scholarship that meant everything, because it was my only ticket out. For years, I had poured my heart into training, waking before dawn, running grueling simulation drills, and studying until my brain ached. I mastered spacecraft piloting, survival tactics, planetary scouting, and zero-gravity operations. Every challenge, every test, I tackled with a quiet, burning hunger, because I knew where I belonged, the Frontier Exploration Force. I wanted to be among the first to touch the soil of undiscovered planets, map uncharted galaxies, and find resources that could change the fate of humanity. The frontier was my calling. It was freedom. But my family, they had other plans for me. My parents only cared about two things: status and money. They loved Veronica, my younger sister, with an obsessive devotion. The golden child, the fragile beauty, the one who deserved the best of everything. Me, I was useful to them. Not loved, not cherished, just useful. The academy paid its cadets well, even as students. It was a way to help us prepare for life after graduation, to fund our gear, secure investments for the future, or even support our families if needed. But I never saw a credit of it. My parents controlled my bank account. They drained it constantly to fund Veronica's extravagant life. New designer dresses, luxury vacations on the Mars colonies, private tutors for a career she didn't even want. While I worked my body to exhaustion in zero-gravity combat training, Veronica bought another set of crystal-studded heels. While I endured grueling spacecraft navigation exams, she was shopping on Europa's orbital district. And when I tried to speak up, said, "You should be grateful you can help your family, Valeria. You don't need much, Veronica does. We're only thinking of your future." Their version of my future: a high-paying outer world colony management job, overseeing distant settlements, signing reports, sitting behind a desk in a glass dome, while workers toiled away mining resources. The safest, most stable, most profitable career. One that would ensure I kept sending them money. For years, I let them shape me. I told myself it was my duty to support them, that if I just obeyed, if I chose security over passion, maybe, just maybe, they'd finally treat me like a daughter, not a tool. I buried my dream of the Frontier Exploration Force. I smiled when they praised me for being so responsible, for making the right choice, unlike those reckless cadets who wanted to risk their lives for adventure. I convinced myself that love was something you earned. But deep down, a part of me still ached for the stars. I watched my classmates prepare for their final choices, debating which fields they'd be drafted into: pilots, explorers, colonists, engineers. Some would settle on newly terraformed planets. Others would be the first to touch unknown ground. And I was about to lock myself into a lifetime of safe, controlled drudgery for a family that never even asked me what I wanted. It happened by accident. A week before graduation, I was reviewing my financial records in the Academy's Data Archive Center. It was just supposed to be a quick check, confirming my stipend, making sure I had funds for my graduation gear, but instead, I found something else. A massive transaction, drained from my account, transferred to a private orbital property on Venus. My heart pounded as I scanned through the details. Luxury residence contract, paid in full. The buyer? Veronica. I sat there, frozen, my fingers trembling over the screen. They had used my money to buy Veronica a home. A home! The reality hit like a plasma round to the chest. This wasn't for the family. This wasn't for stability. Everything I had worked for, all my sacrifices, had been for her. Veronica, the one who had never lifted a finger, the one who had never struggled, never fought, never earned anything. My whole life, I had been their safety net, their funding source, their backup plan, and they had never planned anything for me. That night, I lay awake in my dorm, staring at the metal ceiling, feeling something inside me burn. Not sadness, not grief, not even betrayal, Anger, a deep, unrelenting anger. And for the first time in my life, I let it consume me. I wasn't their daughter. I wasn't their tool, and I wasn't going to live for them anymore. The career drafting ceremony was coming. My final decision, the path that would determine the rest of my life. I knew what they expected. I knew they would be watching, waiting for me to make the right choice. But they had stolen enough from me. They had taken my money. They had taken my freedom. They had taken my childhood. I wouldn't let them take my future. Not anymore. As dawn broke over the Academy's glittering skyline, I stared out at the launch pads, rows of sleek starships preparing for deep space travel. Tomorrow, I would stand in front of the world and announce my career path. And for the first time in my life, I was going to choose for myself. I smiled. Let them be furious, let them scream. Because in 24 hours, I would shock them all, and I would finally be free. The graduation hall was packed, a massive glimmering dome overlooking Earth's skyline, filled with cadets in pristine uniforms, their polished boots reflecting the golden light from the banners above. Hundreds of spectators, government officials, high-ranking officers, corporate sponsors, watched from the gallery, waiting for the next wave of space pioneers to make their choices. This was the career drafting ceremony, the moment where we, the Academy's finest, would stand before the world and declare our futures. Most cadets were nervous. I wasn't, because for the first time in my life, I was in control. My family sat in the front row. My father, stiff and expectant, dressed in the finest tailored suit his connections could afford. My mother, perfectly poised, wearing the expression of someone who is about to reap the rewards of a long investment. And Veronica? She barely glanced at me. Draped in luxury fabrics, her wrist adorned with a watch that cost more than a small ship, she was scrolling through her holoscreen, bored. She was waiting for me to finish my duty, for me to secure the high-paying career they had planned for me. I clenched my fists as the names were called one by one. Cadets stepped forward, confidently stating their chosen fields: Outer World Colony Management, Spacecraft Command, Engineering Divisions. Then, Valeria Kepler. The hall fell silent. I rose from my seat, stepping onto the illuminated stage. The eyes of the entire Academy and my family locked onto me. My voice was steady, clear, unshakable. I choose the Frontier Exploration Force. A sharp gasp rippled through the crowd. For the first time, I saw true shock on my parents' faces. For a brief moment, no one spoke. Then, whispers exploded across the room. The Frontier Exploration Force. It was the most dangerous and unpredictable field. Only a handful of the boldest, most reckless cadets chose it. Instead of comfortable colony assignments, explorers were sent into the unknown, mapping planets, surviving extreme conditions, facing the most hostile and unexplored regions of space. I felt the weight of their judgment, their disbelief, but I didn't waver. I looked directly at my father's stunned expression, my mother's pale face, Veronica's slack-jawed disbelief. I had spent my life following their orders. Not anymore. As soon as the ceremony ended, my family descended on me like a pack of wolves. "Are you out of your mind?" my father hissed, barely keeping his voice down. "This is a reckless, selfish decision." "Do you have any idea what you've done?" My mother's eyes burned with fury. "You've thrown away everything we built for you." "We?" I let out a bitter laugh. "They had never built anything for me." "You were supposed to choose colony management," my father snapped. "That position would have set you up for life. It was the perfect job." I turned on him, my voice colder than the void of space. "Perfect for who?" Silence. Veronica finally spoke, her tone dripping with disbelief. "Why would you choose that?" She gestured toward the holoscreen displaying the Frontier Exploration symbol, a blazing star over an uncharted planet. "You're not like those rough types." I folded my arms. "No, Veronica, I'm not like them." I met her gaze, unwavering. "I'm stronger." My father's face darkened. "We spent years making sure you had a future, and you repay us like this?" "No," I shook my head, stepping closer. "You spent years making sure Veronica had a future. You spent my money on her. You built her life with my earnings, my sacrifices. My mother's lips parted. Valerie, don't be dramatic. I saw the financial records. I cut her off, my voice sharp. The Venus property, the luxury accounts, the funds you drained, you took everything from me. For the first time in my life, they looked afraid. Not because they cared about my feelings, not because they regretted what they had done, because they knew they had lost control. You were supposed to understand, my father muttered, as if I was a child throwing a tantrum. I let out a short laugh. I do understand. I leaned in, dropping my voice to a whisper. I understand that you never saw me as a daughter, just a bank account. They demanded I change my decision. They threatened to disown me. They tried to manipulate me, guilt-trip me, remind me of my duties. They even said Veronica needed me, but I just smiled. No. One word, and for the first time in my life, I was free. I turned away, walking toward the docking bay where my new team awaited, the people who would become my real family. Behind me, my parents called my name. Veronica stared in shock, realizing for the first time that I was no longer her servant. I didn't look back. As I stepped into the frontier exploration vessel, I felt something I had never felt before. Relief, excitement, freedom, no more expectations, no more stolen money, no more sacrificing my dreams for people who never cared. The engines rumbled beneath my feet. The vast expanse of space stretched before me. This was my future, and it was mine alone. With one last glance at Earth, I took my seat in the cockpit. Lieutenant Kepler, ready for launch. And I left them behind. The moment the ship lifted off, I knew there was no turning back. The engines roared beneath me, sending vibrations through the cabin as we ascended through Earth's atmosphere, breaking past the gravitational pull that had tethered me down for too long. I watched the planet shrink behind us, its blue and green surface fading into the darkness of space. I was free, and for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged. The Frontier Exploration Force was nothing like the Academy. There were no fancy uniforms, no long-winded speeches about honor and duty. There was only raw survival, calculated risks, and the constant hum of the unknown. I wasn't just a cadet anymore. I was an explorer. Training was brutal. Unlike the structured drills at the Academy, we had to adapt to real scenarios. Crash landings, zero-gravity repairs, extreme planetary conditions. Piloting was different. The sleek, controlled simulations were nothing compared to the chaotic, unpredictable nature of deep space travel. I had to learn to navigate asteroid storms, black hole gravity wells, and systems no one had ever mapped before. My crew was unlike anyone I had ever met. Veterans, rogue scientists, engineers with prosthetic limbs and cybernetic enhancements. These were people who had already stared death in the face and laughed. And somehow, I fit in perfectly. The moment we touched down on our first unmapped planet, I felt an electric thrill pulse through me. The terrain was unlike anything on Earth. Vast fields of shimmering, violet-hued plants that glowed in the dark, mountains with jagged peaks that scraped the low-hanging clouds, and a sky filled with two suns casting shifting shadows across the land. I was the first human to ever set foot here. I knelt, pressing my gloved hand against the alien soil, letting the grains sift through my fingers. "Welcome to the frontier," my captain said, grinning. I looked up at the endless horizon, my heart pounding. This was what I had always wanted. Over the next 2 years, I poured everything I had into my work. I led reconnaissance teams, mapping newly discovered planets, searching for habitable zones. I scouted alien ecosystems, collecting samples, learning how different worlds functioned. I encountered storms, gravity shifts, and near-death experiences that pushed my body to its limits. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And people took notice. My crew saw me as one of the best navigators in the force. Commanders praised my quick thinking and adaptability. Scientists fought to work with me because I had a knack for identifying valuable planetary resources. And then, one day, I was called into the command deck. My captain leaned back in her chair, studying me with a sharp, knowing gaze. "You've got potential, Kepler." I frowned. "I'm just doing my job." She smirked. "Your job just saved this fleet a fortune in resources. You think I don't notice when someone's outperforming half the veterans here?" I swallowed hard, my pulse quickening. She tapped a holographic display, my profile glowing in the dim light. We need new leadership. You've earned your own ship. For a second, I couldn't breathe. A captain, my own ship, my own crew, my own missions. I had spent years being told I would be nothing more than a money-making machine for my family. Now, I was being given the stars. I straightened my shoulders, exhaling. I accept. And just like that, Valerie Kepler became Captain Kepler. After the ceremony, I found myself alone, standing in the observation deck of my new ship. The void of space stretched endlessly beyond the reinforced glass, a sea of stars waiting to be explored. That's when my personal comm device beeped. A message. I frowned, pulling it up. My stomach twisted the moment I saw the sender. My father. I hesitated. For a long moment, I debated deleting it without opening it, but some part of me, the part that needed closure, pressed play. His voice came through the speakers, tense and controlled. Valerie, we need to talk. I clenched my jaw. Now they wanted to talk? Not when I was struggling. Not when they drained my funds. Not when I chose my own path. Now. I let out a slow breath, staring out at the endless universe ahead. I knew why they were reaching out. They had seen the headlines. They knew who I had become. And now they wanted a piece of it. I closed the message. Without replying, I turned my back to Earth and prepared for my next mission. Let them wait. I had a galaxy to explore. Years had passed since I was appointed as captain. I had gone from a fresh graduate of the elite Space Force Academy to an experienced explorer, navigating the most treacherous regions of space. Through sheer determination, skill, and a few close brushes with death, I had risen through the ranks until I had something few ever achieved. A ship of my own private exploration vessel. The Valkyrie, a sleek top-of-the-line exploratory vessel, modified to withstand harsh planetary environments, deep space radiation, and high-velocity warp jumps. It was mine, not funded by any government or corporation. Mine, paid for with years of work, my discoveries, and the reputation I had built as one of the best. And then, on a deep space mission at the edge of the known galaxy, I found it. A planet that would change everything. The moment my scanners picked up the readings, my heart stopped. At first, it looked like another dead rock drifting through the void. Barren, uninhabitable. But then, the readings shifted. Oxygen, nitrogen, carbon-based life signatures. I stared at my console, barely breathing. Run a full atmospheric scan. My voice was calm, but inside, I was shaking. My AI system, Nova, processed the data at lightning speed. Atmosphere, 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen. Gravity, 1.03 Earth standard. Surface temperature, moderate. I gripped the edge of my seat. This planet was habitable, not just survivable, not a frozen wasteland or a boiling hellscape, a world nearly identical to Earth. I punched in the coordinates for descent, my hands steady despite the adrenaline rushing through me. If this was real, if these readings held true, I had just found something priceless. The Valkyrie's thrusters roared as we broke through the atmosphere. The clouds parted, revealing a landscape that looked like something out of a dream. Endless forests stretched beneath me, lush and green, untouched by civilization. Rivers cut through the terrain like silver veins, shimmering under the light of twin suns. Towering mountain ranges pierced the horizon, their peaks capped in ice. I landed in a clearing near a massive lake, its waters reflecting the sky like polished glass. The moment my boots hit the ground, a thrill shot through me. I had set foot where no human had ever walked before. The air was crisp, fresh, filled with the scent of vegetation and minerals. My environmental suit confirmed what I already knew. This was a perfect world, and it was mine. The real discovery wasn't just the lush environment or the perfect atmosphere, it was what lay beneath the surface. As my team and I began scanning the ground, the readings became chaotic. My chief geologist, Oren, knelt beside a rock formation, his hands shaking as he checked his instruments. Captain, this can't be real. I crouched beside him, frowning at the scanner's display. High-density mineral deposits, radiation signatures from energy-rich compounds, and traces of rare metals that shouldn't exist in the system. I ran my fingers over the black and gold veins in the rock, feeling the energy pulsing beneath my gloves. This planet wasn't just habitable. It was a gold mine. Rare metals that could revolutionize spacecraft technology, energy sources more potent than anything currently used in the galactic core, organic compounds with potential medical applications, possibly the key to curing diseases humanity had been battling for centuries. This wasn't just another planet, this was a jackpot. The moment the data was confirmed, I sent out an encrypted transmission. The response was instantaneous. The United Galactic Council wanted to claim it. Private corporations offered astronomical sums to buy rights to the planet. Scientific institutions begged for priority access to study its unique ecosystem. For the first time in galactic history, an explorer, not a corporation, not a government, held the rights to an entire planet. I had found it. I had claimed it. And it would be named after me, Valeria Prime. The name spread across the galaxy in hours. My discovery was breaking every newsfeed, every scientific journal, every financial network. I had done what no one else had ever done. And suddenly, I was not just an explorer. I was a legend. Wealth beyond imagination. That's what they offered me. Governments, mega corporations, private investors. They all wanted a piece of Valeria Prime. The numbers were absurd. Trillions of credits for exclusive mining rights, shares in the largest tech and energy companies in the galaxy, entire fleets offered in exchange for access to the planet's resources. I had gone from a girl whose own family stole from her to one of the richest people in the galaxy. The irony wasn't lost on me. When I finally returned to Earth, it wasn't as a cadet, not as a daughter desperate for approval. I returned as Valerie Kepler, the most powerful explorer in the galaxy. As I stepped off my private transport, holoscreens lit up with my name, my face, my legacy. Crowds gathered to see me, to catch a glimpse of the woman who had discovered a planet of unparalleled value. And that's when I saw them. Standing on the sidelines, away from the reporters, were my parents. Veronica stood beside them, her face a mix of shock and something else. Something close to jealousy. I smirked. They had cast me aside, stolen from me, tried to control me, and now I was untouchable. With my newfound wealth, I could have done anything. Buy entire cities, rule entire star systems. But I didn't want power. I wanted freedom. So I did the one thing they never expected. I built my own fleet. An exploration fleet. Not for profit, not for control, but for the dream I had since I was a child, to push the boundaries of the known universe. I would chart new worlds. I would find new frontiers. I would leave my mark on the galaxy on my own terms. No one could stop me. Not my family, not the corporations, not the governments that wanted to own me. This was my future, and I was just getting started. I had barely set foot on Earth before they found me. My name was everywhere. The discovery of Valeria Prime had turned me into a legend, a billionaire, a pioneer. Governments fought for my attention. Corporations flooded my inbox with offers worth more than entire planets. And yet, the first message that reached me wasn't from a diplomat or an executive. It was from my father. Valerie, sweetheart, we need to talk. It's important. We miss you. Please come home. I stared at the message, feeling nothing. They hadn't cared when I left. Hadn't cared when they drained my bank account. Hadn't cared when I chose my own future. But now they missed me. I didn't respond. I didn't have to, because the very next day, they showed up in person. The spaceport was swarming with security and reporters, cameras flashing as I stepped out of my private transport. And there they were, my parents, Veronica, standing at the edge of the crowd, waiting for me like they had always been there. My mother gasped when she saw me. Valerie? Her voice was thick with emotion, eyes glistening with tears that I didn't believe for a second. My father stepped forward, a practiced look of concern on his face. We need to talk. Veronica was the last to approach, hesitating for effect, playing the part of the fragile younger sister. I'm so proud of you, she whispered, her voice soft, almost trembling. I've missed you. I tilted my head, amused at the sheer audacity of it all. Really? You missed me? I repeated, crossing my arms. That's interesting, because I seem to remember you taking everything I had before I left. Their smiles faltered. But my father, ever the manipulator, forced a chuckle. That's in the past, sweetheart. We're family. I let the silence drag between us, watching them squirm. They were so sure that I would forgive them, so sure that I would fall back into their trap. But they had no idea who I had become. They followed me to my private lounge, desperate to have a conversation away from the cameras. Once we were alone, my mother immediately launched into her performance. "We were wrong, Valerie." She clasped her hands together, her voice trembling just enough to sound convincing. "We should have supported you. We should have believed in you. But we were scared, you know." I raised an eyebrow. "Scared?" My father nodded solemnly. "We didn't want you to struggle, sweetheart. You have to understand. We thought we were protecting you." I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. "Protecting me?" I leaned forward, meeting his gaze. "You drained my money, forced me into a future I didn't want, and made sure Veronica had everything I was denied. Tell me, how exactly was that protecting me?" Veronica finally spoke up, her voice small and pitiful. "Life hasn't been easy for me either," she murmured. I turned to her, eyes narrowing. "Oh, tell me, Veronica, how was it hard for you?" She hesitated. I didn't give her time to come up with a lie. "Was it hard wearing the designer clothes you bought with my money?" I asked coldly. "Was it hard attending expensive events while I was scraping by in training? Was it hard knowing that I was supposed to work my entire life just so you wouldn't have to?" Her lip trembled. "I didn't ask for that." I scoffed. "No, you didn't, but you sure as hell enjoyed it." She had nothing to say to that. My father sighed dramatically, rubbing his temples as if he were the victim in all of this. "Look, Valerie," he said, switching tactics. "We're not asking for much. We just need some help." And there it was. I tilted my head. "Help?" My mother nodded eagerly. "Just a small loan." A small loan. I nearly laughed. They didn't regret what they had done. They didn't even care about me. They just wanted money. I leaned back, studying them carefully. The people sitting across from me weren't my family. They were leeches, parasitic, self-serving opportunists who had only ever seen me as a resource. And now, they were nothing. I stood up slow and deliberate. "You want my help?" They all nodded eagerly. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single credit chip. I tossed it on the table between them. "There, that's all you get." My mother gasped. "Valerie, be serious." "Oh, I am," I interrupted. "You took everything from me. Every credit, every opportunity, every ounce of love and care I had to give. And now you have the audacity to come here and act like none of it happened?" I shook my head, my voice cold, merciless. "You made your choice when you used me, and I made mine when I walked away." They were stunned. Veronica's face twisted with rage, her mask finally slipping. "You selfish bitch!" I laughed, a real genuine laugh. "Now there's the real you." My father's expression hardened. "You'll regret this, Valerie." I smirked. "No, I won't." Without another word, I turned my back on them for the last time. As I walked out of the lounge, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. I had cut the last ties to my past. I owed them nothing. I belonged to no one. I had an empire to build, a fleet to lead, and an entire universe to explore. Let them rot in their own greed. I had better things to do. They didn't give up easily. Even after I shut them down at the spaceport, they kept trying. For weeks, my inbox was flooded with messages, calls from unknown numbers, pleas, demands, thinly veiled threats. They thought if they kept pushing, kept reminding me that we were family, I'd cave. They thought wrong. I finally agreed to meet them one last time, not because I owed them anything, but because I wanted them to see exactly what they had lost. I chose the location, a high-rise meeting room overlooking the glowing skyline of New Manhattan. It was the headquarters of my new exploration fleet, a project that would send dozens of ships deeper into the galaxy than ever before. The future of space expansion was in my hands, and yet my family still thought they could control me. They arrived exactly on time, dressed in the best clothes they could afford, trying to look like they still belonged in my world. Veronica walked in first, her heels clicking against the polished floor, her usual air of superiority cracking under the weight of reality. My mother followed, her face carefully composed, the same way it had always been when she wanted something. My father was last, looking around the room like he belonged there, like he still had power over me. I let the silence stretch as they took their seats across from me. Then I leaned back and crossed my arms. "Talk." My mother spoke first. Valerie, darling, we've had time to reflect. We realize now that we made mistakes. I raised an eyebrow. Mistakes? She nodded quickly. We were too hard on you. We should have supported your dreams. My father cleared his throat. But we can make things right. I smirked. Let me guess. You need money. My mother had the audacity to look offended. It's not about money. It's about family. I stared at her. That's interesting. Because when I was struggling, when you were draining my bank account to fund Veronica's future, I don't recall you caring about family then. Veronica shifted uncomfortably. Look, Val, we all made choices. But we can start over. We should be supporting each other. I laughed. A cold, sharp sound that made them all flinch. Supporting each other? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. Tell me, Veronica, what exactly did you ever do to support me? She pressed her lips together, unable to answer. I turned to my parents. And you too. Did you ever once think about what I wanted? Did it ever cross your minds that maybe I had dreams too? Or was I just a wallet to you? My father sighed heavily, switching tactics. Valerie, listen, we are family. Blood ties are important. No matter what happened in the past, we should be standing together. I tilted my head. Why? Because now that I have money, suddenly I matter? My mother tried again. We were only trying to do what was best for you. That was it. That was the moment I snapped. I slammed my hands on the table, making them all jump. No. My voice was calm, but deadly. You were trying to do what was best for you. You never planned for me to have a future. And now? I smiled coldly. You are not part of mine. For the first time, they looked scared. Scared because they knew they had lost. My mother's voice wavered. But we love you. No, you don't. I cut her off. You loved what I could do for you. There's a difference. Veronica leaned forward, her hands clenched into fists. So, that's it? You're just going to abandon us? I gave her a slow, deliberate nod. Just like you abandoned me when I needed you. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. This was it. The last conversation. The last chance they would ever have to manipulate me. And they knew it. My father's face turned red with anger. You'll regret this, Valerie. I smiled. No, I won't. Without another word, I turned and walked away. They called after me, voices desperate. But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. And this time, I never would. The past was behind me. I had walked away from the people who once controlled my life, taken back my power, and built something greater than they could ever imagine. Now, it was time to decide what to do with it. I didn't want revenge. I didn't need to ruin them. They had already destroyed themselves. No, I wanted something better, something that mattered. And so I built an empire that no one could take away from me. I had seen the best and worst of humanity. I had watched corrupt corporations hoard the best technology for the elite. I had watched governments use explorers like disposable tools, sending them out to die on forgotten worlds. I had watched people like me, dreamers, pioneers, get exploited for their ambition. I wasn't going to let that happen anymore. With my wealth and influence, I founded my own fleet, an independent exploratory organization, free from corporate control and political agendas. We would find new frontiers, not to claim them, but to open doors for those who deserved a chance. I still remembered the grueling years at the academy, struggling for a future my own family never wanted me to have. The sleepless nights, the hunger, the desperation to prove myself. I had done it alone, but no one should have to. So I funded scholarships for young cadets, those who had no wealth, no family backing, no connections. Those who had the talent, the drive, but none of the resources. I made sure that no one would have to suffer the way I had. The people I recruited for my fleet weren't just the best. They were the ones who had been overlooked. The ones who had been called too poor, too reckless, or not worth the investment. I gathered scientists, pilots, engineers, and explorers who shared my vision, not just for profit, but for discovery. And together, we built something unstoppable. We were going to change space travel forever. The galaxy had always been a battleground for power. Governments and corporations fought over territory, resources, and control. But I wasn't playing their game. I wasn't fighting for control. I was fighting for the future. We found new worlds, not to claim them, but to ensure they were explored ethically. We discovered new resources, not for greedy corporations, but for technological advancements that benefited all. We pushed the limits of space travel, not for war, but for knowledge. We weren't just explorers, we were pioneers. Sometimes people asked me if I ever thought about my family, if I ever regretted leaving them behind. I didn't. They had made their choices, and I had made mine. The difference was I had built something lasting. They had wasted everything I gave them. They were nothing now, and I had everything. As I stood on the bridge of my flagship, gazing at the endless void ahead, I felt something I had never felt before: absolute freedom. This was my future. This was my legacy, and I would spend the rest of my life chasing the stars on my own terms.